You have been told you need a full year of income saved before you are allowed to feel safe. And that idea is the exact reason your emergency fund has never gotten off the ground. Let me correct it now. The number you actually need is far smaller than the one keeping you frozen, and on a $50,000 salary, you can reach it faster than people earning double who still could not cover one broken transmission. Stay with me, because the first thing I am about to fix is the quiet reason most funds never get started. The person I watched do it is named Kiara, and 3 years before her fund could cover a full year of expenses, she was saving nothing at all. She was doing what a lot of people on a modest salary quietly do, which is survive the month and hope that nothing important breaks before the next one. Her turning point was not a raise, and it was not some secret side hustle she stumbled into. It came from a single sentence she read late one night that reframed the entire problem. An emergency fund is not a year of your income, it is a year of your expenses. And those two numbers sit much further apart than almost anyone assumes. Stay with that idea for a moment, because it is the hinge the whole thing turns on. When the phrase "a full year of emergency savings" gets thrown around, people hear 1 full year of salary, and their brain slams the door shut before they even begin. On $50,000 a year, the thought of stacking up another $50,000 feels absurd, so they never take a single step toward it. But Kiara's real target was never $50,000. Her rent, her groceries, her insurance, her utilities, the true cost of simply keeping her life running came out to roughly $2,500 a month. 12 months of that is $30,000. Still a serious number and still a real mountain. Yet $30,000 and $50,000 are two completely different climbs, and only one of them is realistic on her paycheck. It is worth pausing on why a full year, specifically, the advice you usually hear is 3 to 6 months of expenses, and for a lot of households that range is a perfectly reasonable target. Kiara aimed higher on purpose, and her reasons matter for you too. She had a single income, with no partner's paycheck to catch her if hers disappeared. She worked in a field where layoffs came in waves and job hunts could stretch on for months. And she had spent years feeling that low, permanent hum of money anxiety, the kind that follows you into your sleep. A full year was not overkill for her situation. It was the amount that finally let her breathe. If your life has more built-in stability than that, you may land closer to 6 months and feel completely secure. The point is not the exact figure. The point is choosing a number based on your real life instead of a rule of thumb you read somewhere. Before we get into where the money actually came from, it helps to be brutally honest about how little of a $50,000 salary ever reaches your hands. The number printed on the offer letter is not the number that hits your account. Social Security and Medicare skim about $3,800 right off the top before you touch a cent. Federal income tax, after the standard deduction, pulls out roughly another $3,800. And depending on which state you happen to live in, more can vanish before payday even arrives. What Kiara actually took home was somewhere around $42,000 a year, which lands close to $3,500 a month. That is the honest starting line, not $50,000, about $3,500 a month to run a life that costs her $2,500. Buried inside that one sentence is the entire strategy. If your essentials run $2,500 a month and you bring home somewhere near $3,500, then roughly $1,000 every single month is not actually spoken for. For a lot of people, that leftover $1,000 simply evaporates. A little more takeout here, a small upgrade there, a subscription they forgot they were even paying for. Kiara's whole plan, stripped down to one idea, was to stop letting that $1,000 disappear and start handing it a job instead. So the first real work was finding her true survival number, and this is the step almost nobody does, honestly. Kiara pulled 3 months of her own bank statements and sorted every single expense into one of 2 buckets. The first bucket was survival: rent, basic groceries, the gas to get to work, insurance, electricity, the phone she genuinely needed in order to hold down a job. The second bucket was everything else: restaurant meals, impulse orders online, the 4 streaming services she barely watched, the small comforts that feel completely mandatory right up until the moment you write them all down and see them stacked together. Only the first bucket feeds your emergency number, and the reason is simple. In a true emergency, the second bucket disappears on its own anyway. Nobody keeps paying for 4 streaming services the month they lose their income. Watch what happens the instant you actually run that sort, because it is the detail that makes this whole idea possible. When Kiara separated survival from comfort, her survival number came out lower than she had guessed. She had always assumed she needed her full level of spending in order to feel safe. What she truly needed to stay afloat, to keep the lights on and a roof overhead and food in the kitchen, turned out to be a good deal less. That gap, the space between what her life costs and what her survival costs, was money she had spent years treating as untouchable for no real reason at all. Try this for yourself before you do anything else. Open your own statements from the last 3 months and run the exact same 2-bucket sort. Be honest with it, maybe even uncomfortably honest. A lot of people who do this walk away genuinely shocked at how much smaller their survival number turns out to be than their spending number. And that gap is the single most encouraging thing you will find in this entire process. It is proof, written in your own hand, that a year of security costs far less than a year of your lifestyle ever will. Now, there is an important detour here that applies to a lot of you watching, and skipping it would be dishonest. If you are carrying high-interest debt, especially credit card balances, the full year does not come first. Debt like that grows faster than any savings account on earth can keep up with, so pouring money into savings while it sits there is like bailing a boat without plugging the hole. The order that actually works looks a little different. You build a small starter buffer, then you turn and attack the high-interest debt with everything you have got. And only once that is gone do you circle back and build the full year. Kiara was lucky enough not to be in that hole when she started. If you are, plug it first. The math rewards you enormously for it. Speaking of that starter buffer, before Kiara chased a full year of anything, she did one small thing that most savings advice races right past. She built a tiny cushion first. Just $1,000 tucked into a separate place, doing nothing but waiting. It sounds almost too modest to bother with, but think about where an enormous number of people are actually starting from. A striking share of Americans could not cover a $1,000 surprise without reaching for a credit card. When your buffer sits at 0, every flat tire and every unexpected dentist visit turns straight into debt, and that debt charges you interest that devours your savings faster than you can ever build them. So the first job was never the year. It was stopping the bleeding. $1,000 quietly turns a crisis into an inconvenience, and that single shift is what let everything after it actually hold. That first 1,000 felt far too small to celebrate. It was, without question, the most important amount in the entire plan. It helps to look hard at the other side of this, the real price of never building the buffer at all, because that price is brutal and mostly hidden from view. When a person with no cushion gets hit by a $500 surprise, they do not simply pay it and move on with their day. They put it on a credit card at an interest rate that can climb past 20% or worse. They reach for a payday loan carrying rates so steep they are genuinely hard to believe. Then the minimum payments start eating into next month's budget, which makes the following surprise even harder to absorb which sends them right back to the card again. That is the debt spiral, and it has very little to do with anyone being bad with money. It is simply what happens to people who never had the $1,000 shock absorber that stops the cycle before it can start. Every dollar Kiara moved into her buffer was quietly buying her out of that trap ahead of time. The fund did far more than earn her a little interest. It saved her from paying interest, which is the much larger number by a wide margin. Which brings us to the real question, the one you have probably been waiting for. Where does a person on a modest salary find enough breathing room to bank a whole year? It came out of 4 places, and not one of them required living like a monk in a cave. The biggest lever was housing, and it is the biggest lever for nearly everyone. Kiara kept her rent well under the line financial guides warn about, choosing a smaller place with a roommate for the first couple of years instead of the solo apartment her income could technically stretch to cover. That single decision saved her something in the neighborhood of $500 a month compared to living alone, which on its own is $6,000 a year flowing toward the goal. Her second lever was the car. She drove a paid-off, unglamorous, completely dependable used car while the people around her rolled trade ins into newer models every few years. A typical new car payment in this country now runs several $100s a month before you even add insurance and the higher registration that comes with a shinier vehicle. By simply refusing to play that game, Kiara kept another few $100s a month out of a car company's pocket and inside her own account. Food was the third lever, where she cooked far more than she ordered out. This was never about misery or eating plain rice every night. It was about noticing that the same $12 spent on groceries stretched across several meals, while $12 handed to a delivery app fed her once and left a tip on top. And then there's the fourth lever, the sneaky one almost nobody keeps an eye on. The creep, the forgotten subscriptions, the small upgrades, the tiny yeses that quietly stack into a number you would never in a million years agree to if someone asked for the whole amount at once. Kiara audited hers and found close to $150 a month bleeding out through channels she had genuinely stopped noticing. Trimming that back was not a sacrifice. It was more like finding money she had been dropping on the sidewalk without looking down. Add those 4 levers together, and the $1,000 a month she needed to hit her goal stops looking like a fantasy and starts looking like arithmetic. There is one more layer worth adding, because those 4 levers are about the ongoing monthly flow. While the very start of a savings journey often needs a jolt of momentum to get moving, Kiara gave herself exactly that. Before the automatic transfers even began, she spent a single weekend selling things she genuinely no longer used. The exercise bike gathering dust in the corner, a pile of clothes with the tag still attached, an old tablet buried in a drawer. That one weekend put a few $100s into the starter buffer almost overnight, and more importantly, it made the goal feel real instead of theoretical. She also stopped treating her tax refund as a bonus to blow on something fun. That once-a-year check, which for a lot of filers runs well over $1,000, went straight into the fund without stopping in her checking account for even a single day. Windfalls are where a plan like this quietly leaps forward. A refund, a work bonus, a birthday check, any money you were not really counting on anyway, is money your future self will barely miss. Now hold Kiara up against that coworker earning $90,000. Call him Byron. Byron was not reckless in any way a stranger would ever notice from across a room. He simply let his spending rise to meet every single raise. A bigger apartment, a newer car, nicer everything, each upgrade perfectly reasonable on its own. On paper, Byron was the success story of the entire office. Underneath it, though, Byron was setting aside only about 5% of his income, which comes to roughly $375 a month, while spending everything else on a lifestyle that now had to be fed and maintained. Kiara, earning almost half of what he did, was quietly moving close to $800 a month into savings. The lower earner was out saving the higher earner by more than 2 to 1, and Byron had no clue any of it was happening because the whole thing stayed invisible from the outside. There is a trap hiding inside Byron's story, and it catches good earners more than almost anyone else. It is called lifestyle creep, and it works so slowly that it never once feels like a decision. You get a raise, and within a month or two, your spending has silently expanded to swallow the entire thing, so you feel just as stretched at $90,000 as you did at $60,000. Kiara did the exact opposite, and she did it deliberately. The one time her pay went up during those 3 years, a small bump, she did not touch her spending at all. She simply raised the amount that moved into savings and let her day-to-day life stay precisely where it was. A raise you never see is a raise you can never lose to a slightly fancier version of your own habits. Now, maybe you are watching this thinking that $1,000 a month of spare room is pure fantasy on your budget, and you might be completely right. Plenty of people simply do not have that gap yet. What matters far more than the pace, though, is something simpler than the amount itself. The size of the transfer counts for less than the fact that it exists at all and refuses to stop. If the most you can move right now is $200 a month, this exact same plan still works. It just takes longer, and that is perfectly okay. A year of savings built slowly is still a year of savings. Someone setting aside $200 a month is building the identical habit, the identical automatic system, and the identical calm that Kiara ended up with. They will simply arrive a couple of seasons later than she did. A person who saves a small amount forever will quietly beat the one waiting for the perfect moment to save a large amount every single time, because that perfect moment never actually shows up. Begin with whatever is real for you today, even if it feels almost embarrassingly small, and let the automation and a few future raises carry it upward from there. Knowing where the money is hiding is one thing. Actually keeping it is a completely different battle, and this is the point where willpower quietly fails almost everyone who tries. Kiara did not attempt to save whatever happened to be left over at the end of the month, because at the end of the month there is never anything left. So she flipped the order entirely. On the day her paycheck arrived, a fixed amount moved automatically into a separate savings account before she could touch it, spend it, or even really register that it had existed. The money she lived on became whatever remained after saving, never the reverse. That one small reversal does more heavy lifting than any budgeting app ever built. You stop relying on discipline 20 times a month. You make one decision, one single time, and then you simply step out of your own way and let the machine run. The separate account matters far more than it first sounds. An emergency fund living in the same checking account you spend from every day stops being an emergency fund at all. It quietly becomes just another number you will rationalize your way into on a slow Tuesday. So Kiara kept hers somewhere with a little friction built in on purpose. A different bank entirely, with a day or two of delay to move money back. Just enough distance that a random late-night craving could never actually reach it. Out of sight really does become out of mind, and in this particular case, that distance is the whole point of the exercise. The account you park it in then starts working quietly for you, or quietly against you, and most savers never notice which one is happening. The average traditional savings account in this country pays less than half of 1%. Leave $30,000 sitting in a place like that, and it earns you around $117 across an entire year, which barely registers as anything. A good high-yield savings account, fully protected, exactly as safe, has been paying somewhere near 4% through this year. That very same $30,000 earns you roughly $1,200 a year instead. We are talking about a difference of more than $1,000 annually for doing nothing beyond keeping your money in a smarter spot. And here is the part that trips people up, so let me settle it plainly. That higher paying account carries the exact same government-backed insurance as your everyday bank, protecting your deposits up to $250,000 per person. Your money is not one bit less safe. These high-yield accounts mostly live at online banks, which skip the cost of running physical branches and hand a chunk of that savings back to you as a better rate. No branch on the corner is the entire trade-off. Once Kiara's fund was full, it was throwing off close to $100 a month all on its own. Money that fed the very fund it came out of. Her savings had started saving for her. If this is the first time a full year of savings has ever sounded like something you could actually pull off, subscribe and stick around, because every week I break down one real money problem exactly like this one. By the time Kiara was a full year into this habit, the balance was real, but the harder part had quietly become defending it. This is the piece that gets left out of nearly every tidy savings plan you will ever read. A full year of savings does not get built in a spreadsheet. It gets built against a constant, low, grinding pressure to spend the thing the very moment it exists. Friends invite you to weekends you cannot truly afford if you are serious about the goal. Sales start feeling like opportunities you would be foolish to pass up, and the fund itself begins whispering that it is big enough now, that surely one small raid could not possibly hurt. Kiara answered all of it with a single rule that protected the whole structure. A true emergency has to be urgent, necessary, and unexpected, all three of those at the same time. When a cost fails even one of those tests, it does not qualify as an emergency. What you are really staring at is a purchase wearing a costume. That one rule quietly solves a problem that sinks a huge number of savers, which is confusing predictable costs with genuine surprises. Your car registration coming due is not a surprise, because you knew the exact date a full year in advance. The holidays do not sneak up on anyone, because they land on the same day every single year. Costs like those belong in what some people call a sinking fund, a small, separate stash you feed a little each month for expenses you can already see rolling toward you. Keep them out of the emergency fund completely, and the emergency fund stops getting raided for things that were never emergencies in the first place. Protect the year and let the boring, predictable stuff have its own quiet little account to live in. One quiet tool deserves a mention right here, because medical costs rank among the most common emergencies of all. If your health plan qualifies you for a health savings account, that account can pull double duty in a way most people overlook. Money going into it lowers your taxable income today, it grows over the years without being taxed, and it comes back out completely tax-free when you spend it on medical care. A funded health savings account sitting quietly alongside your main emergency fund means a surprise medical bill barely scratches the reserve you worked so hard to build. It will not fit everyone's situation, and the plan rules matter, so it is worth checking. But for the people it does fit, it is close to free money the tax code is quietly leaving on the table for you. While we are on the subject of protecting the fund, it is worth naming the handful of mistakes that quietly wreck more emergency funds than plain bad luck ever does. The first is saving with no target at all, just a fuzzy wish to have more someday, which almost always fizzles, because the brain cannot chase a number it has never actually defined. Kiara knew her figure was $30,000 from the very first day, and a clear finish line changes the entire experience. A second mistake is leaving the money parked in checking, where it blends in with everyday spending and slowly gets absorbed without anyone deciding to spend it. Then there is the opposite overcorrection. Taking the emergency fund and pouring it into the stock market to chase a bigger return. That money exists for one job only: to sit boringly and reliably available on your very worst day. A market that happens to be down 20% the same week you lose your job is a trap you never want to spring on yourself. So the emergency fund stays in cash, full stop. And the last mistake is the slow raid, treating the fund like a slush account for wants dressed up in the language of needs. Guard against those four, and the plan mostly runs itself. And this, right here, is exactly why no one believed her. From the outside, nothing about Kiara looked like a person building serious financial security. She had the same modest paycheck as everyone else, an older car, a roommate, and a habit of turning down dinners without offering much explanation. Her coworkers assumed she was simply getting by, maybe even struggling a little, because the work of saving stays completely invisible until the precise moment that it isn't. The doubt was never cruelty. A quiet, boring, consistent transfer every 2 weeks does not look like anything at all. It looks like nothing right up until the day it suddenly looks like a year of freedom. The thing every person around her missed was that boring had been the entire strategy, not some unfortunate side effect of it. None of this happened quickly, by the way. And anyone promising you otherwise is selling you something. Kiara's full year of savings took a little over 3 years to finish building, and the timeline itself ended up teaching her the most. In that very first month, she had her starter 1,000, and for the first time in her adult life, a surprise bill did not send her spiraling. Around the 3-month mark, she had a cushion capable of absorbing most of the ordinary disasters: the car trouble, the medical copay, the laptop that suddenly refuses to turn on. By 6 months, she had crossed into territory most households in this country never reach. A solid half year of survival sitting quietly in reserve. And somewhere past the 2-year point, the entire feeling of it flipped. Savings stopped landing as sacrifice and started feeling like the account was pulling her forward on its own, especially once the interest was chipping in its own $100 a month toward the finish line. There is something worth naming about that flip, because it is the part discipline advice always gets wrong. Kiara did not white-knuckle her way through 3 years of gritted teeth. The automation carried her. After the first couple of months, she genuinely stopped thinking about the transfer at all. It happened in the background of her life, like rent or a phone bill, and the balance grew whether or not she felt motivated on any given day. Motivation is a terrible thing to build a 3-year plan on, because it comes and goes with your mood. A standing automatic transfer does not care how you feel on a rainy Wednesday. It just keeps going. That is the quiet secret underneath every big savings number you have ever been impressed by. It was almost never willpower. It was a system that made willpower unnecessary. Kiara did add one small human touch to keep herself connected to a 3-year goal, and it is worth stealing outright. She tracked the balance on a simple chart she could actually see, and she marked a few milestones genuinely worth pausing on. She celebrated the month the fund first covered 1 full month of expenses. Crossing the 3-month mark earned its own quiet nod, and the day the balance finally reached half a year, she let herself actually feel the weight of it. Each of those moments became a small, private celebration, nothing expensive, just an honest acknowledgement that she was pulling off something most people never manage. Long goals tend to die in the invisible middle, that long gray stretch where the finish line still feels impossibly far away and the starting line is already forgotten. Marking the milestones gave that middle some texture and something to reach for. It turned one enormous, intimidating number into a string of smaller wins she could feel herself collecting one by one. And feeling that progress is exactly what kept the automation from ever getting switched off. So what does a full year actually buy a person earning $50,000? Go back to that car that died in the dead of winter. For most of the people in Kiara's office, A repair like that would have meant a credit card, a fresh balance, another cycle of interest, and a few months of low background stress humming under everything. For Kiara, it meant one afternoon and a slightly smaller number in an account she had built for exactly that kind of moment. The repair itself, though, was never the real prize. The real prize showed up in her posture and in the choices she suddenly felt free to make. When you have a year of expenses standing behind you, you stop deciding things out of fear. Imagine the version of that story where it is not a car, but a job. A round of layoffs sweeps through, and Kiara's name is on the list. For Byron, an event like that would be a 5-alarm fire, because his lifestyle needs feeding every month, and his savings would run dry in a matter of weeks. For Kiara, the same layoff is a serious problem, but it is not a catastrophe. She has 12 months of runway. She can take her time, hold out for the right role instead of grabbing the first desperate offer, and negotiate from a position of calm rather than panic. That runway does not just protect her from disaster. It quietly makes her better at everything, because a person who can afford to walk away almost always gets the better deal. You can turn down the job that pays a little more but would slowly wreck you. You can walk out of a room you would have swallowed hard and tolerated back when you were one paycheck from trouble. Real security barely feels like money at the end of it. It feels like a wall of options standing between you and the worst version of your life. And options change absolutely everything about how a person moves through the world. There is a quieter dividend to all of this too, one that never shows up on a single statement. People with a real cushion behind them sleep differently. That low background static of money worry, the kind that hums under a bad night and turns every unexpected text into a small jolt of dread, simply goes quiet. Relationships feel the change as well, because a startling share of the arguments couples have are really arguments about money and the fear sitting underneath it. Take away the fear, and a lot of that tension quietly drains out of a home. The bigger surprise, though, is what a funded year does on the upside. A funded year does not only let you say no to disaster, it lets you say yes to opportunity. The chance to go back to school, to take the lower-paying job with the far brighter future, to move across the country for something genuinely worth moving for. To finally start the small thing on the side you always talked about but never dared to risk. Fear says no to every one of those by default. A year of runway is what finally lets a person seriously consider saying yes. That is what this channel means when it talks about wealth as quiet freedom. The number sitting on the screen was only ever a means to an end, and the end was always the freedom to choose. And once that full year is finally sitting there, funded and safe and reassuringly boring, a brand new question shows up that Kiara honestly never saw coming. What on earth do you do with a large amount of money that you are almost certainly never going to touch? Here is the strange tension baked into a fully funded emergency year. A big chunk of it just sits there, waiting for a rainy day that might not arrive for years. You need it liquid and you need it safe, so it cannot go anywhere risky, yet leaving every last dollar in plain cash forever means slowly losing ground to rising prices, season after season. That quiet tug of war between staying completely safe and refusing to stand still is the exact doorway into the next stage of a money life. It is also the doorway most people never walk through, mostly because they do not realize it is even there. The calmest possible first step through it has nothing to do with the stock market. It runs through bonds, specifically the kind of savings bonds and treasury bonds backed by the full weight of the United States government. The ones paying a little over 4% right now, where your money stays secure but finally starts keeping pace instead of quietly shrinking. It is easily the least glamorous corner of investing, and that is precisely why it is the right place to begin. Bonds are where a boring, rock-solid foundation turns into an actual head start on retirement, years before most people ever feel allowed to think about that word. I put together a full walkthrough on exactly how bonds work and why they are the quietest, safest on-ramp into thinking about retirement early, long before it ever starts to feel urgent. It is playing on the screen right now, and if the year you just learned to build is step 1, that video is honestly step 2. Kiara's coworkers all wanted to know how someone earning less had somehow ended up with more. This next part is the piece of the answer they never got to see.